Psychology is an interesting subject, because anything that sort of is concerned about analysis of how the human brain works has to be interesting. Um, I'm not sort of an expert on psychology, of course not. Has some interest for me though. When you have powerful emotions like depression, I'm talking here about negative emotions, well, actually positive emotions as well. Actually, specifically, I want to make this video about the concept of anger. Um, Most people in life, unless they're being dishonest, have had at least one point where they felt very angry about something. It's true that there's variation. Some people get a lot angrier and more often than other people, and some people seem to be perpetually calm or upbeat. But even those people who are seemingly calm and upbeat must have had points in their life where they've seen something or felt something that's made them pretty ticked off. For me, I have to admit I do believe that I experience anger more than the average person. At least once every day, if I'm being completely honest. And yet, it's not that I'm a pessimist about life. There's many things I'm optimistic about. There's many things that I feel good about. I think part of the problem is it's difficult to gauge anger because there is a taboo around it. People who are considered to have, let's say, an anger issue are sort of treated like freaks. It comes down to well, if this person's angry all the time, there must be something wrong with them. For me, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with me. For me, it's that I see injustice every single day, and I find injustice hard to tolerate. And that could take many different forms. It could be repression by a government. It could be individual cases of bullying. It could be anything. For example, one of my last videos was about that guy in the London Underground threatening the young woman. That sort of thing I cannot not be angry about. I just can't. Maybe I buy too many newspapers. Maybe that's a source of why I feel angry so often. I think the issue though is not so much anger but how people handle anger. There are many things I admit I find hard to stomach, and I do dwell on them more perhaps than average people. For instance, the power of the tabloid press in this country is something I really find hard to handle. But I guess the test is how you handle anger. It's not about the angry person necessarily being wrong, and I'm not talking about myself here, I'm talking about the general concept. It's not so much that they're wrong, it's that we live in a world where image is everything. And let's say you have a debate, it could be about anything, let's say you have a debate, and person A struggles with their anger, and they not necessarily come out with insults, but they're pretty heated in how they deal with it. Person B has a different opinion, but they're very calm in how they talk about it. Now, it's a human reaction to think person A is a hothead and therefore must be wrong, person B is calm and therefore must be right. I think that's misguided, and I think it's a bit lazy to look at it that way. Because unfortunately, no one likes to see an angry person. It's a sort of, it can be intimidating, and it's even if the person is not angry with them, watching anger is never much fun either. When I see other people angry, it's unpleasant to watch. It's not something that's nice to see. So it automatically invokes a sort of negative response, like that person is crazy or something. Of course, people who, for example, respond with violence, with anger, they do have a problem. But then, is there really the only difference between those people and people who get angry but don't use violence is that they're not using it? And I put myself in the second category. Very often there's people who make me so angry I do honestly want to punch them. Now, we often use the word thug. Does that inclination therefore make me a thug? I mean, what is a thug exactly? Is it someone who threatens innocent people? Is it someone who uses violence as a way to resolve problems? In that case, I'd be a thug. And yet, I never use violence. Never. But I am a very angry person a lot of the time. So, and just to clarify, it's not an anger that I never bully people who can't defend themselves, but I feel a deep, deep anger at injustice. That's the way it is. Some people would say I need to relax because there's nothing I can do about it, etc. And they're right, I do need to relax more. It's a problem I recognise in myself, it's something I want to improve. And the reason I'm putting it online like this is not to act as a sort of voyeuristic insight into my own mind. It's more because I think the general subject needs to be spoken about. We need to stop treating anger like it's an abnormal thing. It's an entirely human emotion. Maybe I feel anger too much, that's true, but to treat anger in itself like it's... I mean, what I'm talking about, if you have, for example, a politician who blows their casket over something, they will be treated like they're unelectable. Because we live in an age where the damn press controls everything. I've always believed the press in this country is far too powerful. If you have a politician who's genuinely upset or angry over something they see as injustice or wrong in society, as far as I'm concerned, they're representing the views of their constituents in expressing that anger. Yet the media, I shouldn't generalise in that way, but the tabloid press will portray them as unelectable, as a hothead, as some sort of freak. And what the tabloid press do is they mould politicians into being basically suits with a smile. And that's not, I'm not attacking politicians for that. I believe they're being put in a very difficult position. But you know, there's a lot of great figures in our political history who would absolutely be unelected today. Churchill, for example, could not get elected today because he would not fit the media image. You know, he's crude, he's brash, he's pretty vulgar in a lot of his mannerisms. Was, I should say. He wouldn't be elected. And politicians who do stand out are, provide an example, George Galloway. Now, I hate a lot of his views. I'm much more centrist than him. I think a lot of his views are far left rubbish, and hypocritical for that matter. But I think that it's unfortunate that people who don't fit into the media image of what parliamentarians should be are put on the margins. It should be the public for the public to decide, not for the gutter press. And the press has far too much influence in this country in shaping people's minds. And that's not a defence of George Galloway, I don't like the man, but another example would be the late Bob Crow. Again, he was caricatured by the right-wing press as a pugilistic unionist, a fiery Marxist, etc. Again, I don't 100% subscribe to his ideology, but he was a man of conviction. And that is something that has to be admired. Too much, you know, it's not that I think, for example, aggressiveness in politics is a good thing, but there's inconsistency. On one hand, there's complaints that Prime Minister's questions are too much like Punch and Judy, like a slanging match. On the other hand, do you really want a parliament that's too polite? And I do have issues with freedom of expression in the House of Commons, whereby if a member speaks his or her mind bluntly, they could be removed for breaching etiquette. I think that's extremely outdated and should be reformed. I think we should have a much more lively Commons, actually, at times. Well, obviously there'd be some situations, like if it's outright slander or something, yeah, I can understand the need to curtail that, but I do think we should have more a situation where parliamentarians can speak their mind a lot more. But we have a situation in this public, and this makes me very angry, whereby if a public figure does speak their mind, they're crucified by the Murdoch press, unless of course it's something that the Murdoch press approves of, like slandering the unemployed. That's okay. But you know, when you have a trade unionist like Bob Crow standing up for workers' rights, and I acknowledge the other side of the argument, like holding London to a standstill and so on, but when you have a man like that who is doing his job, then you have the Murdoch press crucifying him, like they did because he took a short holiday, as if he didn't deserve it, as if the people they support never do. And it's just incredibly hypocritical. But the reason I mention all this is because I'm talking about how anger is perceived in society. You know, sometimes it's about how we control anger. Watching that video last night of the guy on the train, I honestly felt like punching him. But the reality is, if I was there, I'm pretty sure I'd stand up for it, but I wouldn't assault a man, because then I'd be facing charges. Then I would be the thug, I would be the one starting it. So this is all psychology. The problem is violence is, the second you use violence, then you've lost the argument because you're seen as someone who is incapable of controlling temper, and that's probably true. I mean, we can't use violence in this world to resolve our differences in terms of common confrontations like that. You just can't. Even though in my view those people deserve it. I mean, I honestly wouldn't shed a tear if someone like a lot of the people I take issue with were to be assaulted. I wouldn't care. I really wouldn't care. And yet, so to me, that's sort of like an honest expression of how I feel. But we cannot have society like that, because they would just turn around and say, oh well, we disagree with you, you deserve to be assaulted. So then, you know, you'd have anarchy. So I acknowledge that you can't resolve differences in that way. But I think anyone who's being honest, anyone who's ever felt rage at something, if they're being brutally honest with themselves, they would, you know, physical violence is just an extended expression of anger, albeit one that would land you in court. And obviously, incidentally, if anyone misunderstands this, in no way am I condoning physical violence. I'm just saying that, is it really that different from, well, it is, but it's what I'm trying to explain here is I believe it's an extended expression of anger. Now, someone who's angry is an angry person. Someone who uses violence with anger is a thug. That's the general idea. And I've done it. I've called people thugs when they've used violence. But anger needs to be understood. I think it's just about how we control anger. I'd never assault someone unless I was protecting someone else. I mean, if she was my girlfriend and the drunk was to do that, I'd be pretty hard pushed not to defend her. And let's say he swung out at her, hell yeah, I'd use violence in that situation. So there's sort of situations like self-defense that violence is 100% justified if it's a clear case of self-defense or defending a more vulnerable person. And pacifists, I think, are... My question for pacifists would be, okay, you don't believe in violence, but my question for male pacifists, for example, would be, if your wife or girlfriend was to be attacked by a drunk stranger and you were there, would you honestly stand by and watch that and not use any sort of physical force to defend her? And there's situations like that where I really question pacifism. And this isn't a video about pacifism, it's a video about anger. I guess I'm just waffling here, I'm going off on a tangent, but it's just different thoughts that I'm putting in. And I'd like to know people's views on this. I'm not saying that physical violence is justified, I'm really not. And I'd be a hypocrite if I was to condone that, because when I see physical violence, I'm like everyone else, says, oh yeah, that's a thug who can't control their temper. But I think if people are being honest, most of us have felt that. How often do we say things like, oh, I could kill him, when you don't really mean it? You're not actually going to kill someone. You know? So, how we express anger, how we handle anger, is a very interesting thing. And a lot of it's to do with perception of the other person having more power. And sometimes when you are the underdog, it can be incredibly difficult to take a view, oh well, it's a balanced situation, I need to control my temper, etc. Because it is an expression of despair. You see injustice, and the party that is carrying out the injustice has more power. So it's just some thoughts to put out there.